Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we dive into the deepening crisis in Minsk, the city that has become a focal point for turbulence in Belarus, and the unsettling question: if the army has turned against the regime who controls Belarus now. The events unfolding in Belarus are dramatic and alarming. At the center is Alexander Lukashenko, the longtime president whose grip on power has been described as iron-clad. Yet recent reports suggest cracks. The military, long considered loyal to the regime, appears to be wavering. These are not small signs. They point to a possible fracture within the security apparatus that could reshape the future of Belarus. Since his rise to power in 1994, Lukashenko has molded Belarus into a highly centralized state, one where political opposition is stifled, the media and judiciary are controlled, and the security services serve as the backbone of his rule. Yet over the last few years, economic stagnation, mounting external pressures, and the spillover effects of regional conflict have weakened some of the structural supports of his regime. Belarus's growing entanglement with Ukraine and Russia has increased vulnerability to external forces and heightened internal tensions. Belarus's role in the Russia-Ukraine war has drawn it deeper into Moscow's orbit and undermined its already fragile sovereignty. The core of the current crisis is this: there are credible indications that parts of the Belarusian military and security apparatus are no longer fully reliable to Lukashenko. Whether this is outright defection or simply a reduction in active loyalty, the implications are grave. Some analysts argue that the regime's traditional monopoly on force may be eroding. With the army's loyalty in question, the regime's ability to govern, suppress protest, or deter external interference weakens. Why would the army begin to drift away? Several interlocking factors play in. First, the costs of maintaining security operations, including repression and border control, are rising. Economic strains from sanctions and the fall out of regional war make sustaining such a system more difficult. Second, the regime's reliance on Moscow for economic and military support has grown, meaning that the Belarusian military may find itself stuck between serving Minsk or serving Moscow, or both. Third, popular discontent has grown. Protests, labor unrest, and a sense of national identity distinct from the regime's narrative have mounted. When the rank and file begin to question orders, things shift fast. Given these developments, the question becomes, who is actually in control now? The answer is layered. On one level, Lukashenko remains the formal head of the state. He retains the title, the institutions, and overt functions of power. But real control appears to have become shared or contested. One key actor is Moscow. Russia's influence in Belarus has grown significantly in recent years. Military deployments, deeper economic integration, and shared security infrastructure mean that Belarus's autonomy has been decreasing. So while it may not be accurate to say Russia runs Belarus in every regard, the Kremlin has substantial leverage over Minsk. Another actor is the Belarusian security and military elite itself. As loyalty weakens, the elite becomes a power broker. If sections of the military decide not to enforce orders from the regime or to shift allegiance, then control shifts. We may not yet see an outright collapse, but the regime is losing its monopoly. In this sense, control becomes more diffused between Lukashenko, his inner circle, the military leadership, and external actors. Meanwhile, the popular opposition also plays a role, though not yet in a position of direct control. The protests in Belarus since 2020 showed widespread dissatisfaction with the regime, and although they have been brutally suppressed, they've changed the legitimacy equation. The regime no longer enjoys unquestioned acceptance. Its backing within society is eroded. In a moment when the state's coercive power is compromised, public dissent becomes more dangerous for the regime. The current state of control in Belarus is best seen as contested and shifting rather than stable. Lukashenko retains formal power, but his margin of maneuver has shrunk. The army's loyalty is uncertain, Moscow's grip is stronger, and the regime's legitimacy is undermined. There are major risks and implications of this situation. A security breakdown is one. If the military truly fragments, Belarus could face internal instability, elite splits, power vacuums, or conflict between competing factions. The civil-military dynamic is central. Without the military backing the regime, its ability to enforce rule fades. Foreign interference becomes more likely. If Moscow holds more sway, Belarus's foreign policy and internal decisions may increasingly serve Russian interests rather than Belarusian ones. We already see signs of deeper integration, shared military infrastructure, and economic dependency. The regime may also become even more repressive in a bid to cling to power. When rulers feel their grip slipping, they often lean harder on security forces, impose harsher controls, and suspend rights. That in turn can further alienate the public and push more parts of the system into conflict with the regime. There's also an economic dimension. Belarus's economy is under strain, isolation, sanctions, dependence on Russia, and domestic inefficiencies. The erosion of control could hasten economic decline, immigration, brain drain, and capital flight, all of which feed instability. Lastly, there's the prospect of regime change, either through internal collapse, elite defection, or external intervention. While this may not be imminent, the shifted balance of power makes it more plausible. Some scenario planning suggests that Belarus could spiral into lower regime stability and higher Russian influence, or a more extreme outcome where Belarus becomes an annexed or semi-annexed part of Russia. For those wondering what to watch for the early warning signs that the balance of power is shifting, here are some key indicators. Public splits within the military leadership, such as resignations, defections, or critical statements from generals or commanders. Reduction in the regime's ability to mobilize security forces, with fewer troops deployed, fewer arrests, or less effective suppression of protest. Increased presence of Russian military or security personnel on Belarusian soil, or new agreements favoring Russian control. Economic disruptions tied to the security sector, such as unpaid salaries for military or police, leading to morale issues. Visible propaganda shifts, where regime messaging becomes weaker, more nationalistic, or more accommodating to Moscow. Fallout of protests or strikes turning into broader non-compliance by civil servants, soldiers, or public institutions. What does this mean for the region and beyond? The implications are significant. Belarus sits at a strategic crossroads between Russia and Europe. A destabilized Belarus could raise tensions across Eastern Europe, from refugee flows to border security, energy transit, cyber attacks, and even military escalation. For Russia, Belarus serves as a forward outpost and buffer zone. A weakened Belarus may reduce Russia's strategic depth or force Russia to intervene directly, raising the risk of wider conflict. For Europe and NATO, ensuring stability in Belarus matters for the integrity of the eastern flank. From the perspective of Belarusian citizens, this moment is fraught with both danger and opportunity. On the one hand, a breaking regime may open space for political change, more openness, and increased sovereignty. On the other, the collapse of order could unleash repression, hardship, and external domination. The choice facing Belarusians is whether they will become passive victims of these structural forces or active participants shaping the future. The crisis in Minsk reflects more than a protest or a momentary upheaval. It signals a breakdown in the traditional pillars of authoritarian control, the monopoly of force, the legitimacy of the regime, and the coherence of the elite. The fact that the army is showing signs of independence from the regime means that control in Belarus is no longer concentrated in one place. Instead, it is contested among the presidency, the military, Russia, and society itself. Though Lukashenko remains president in title, the real levers of power are diffused and shifting. The future could go in many directions, from a mere reconfiguration of the regime to a wholesale transformation of the state. What seems certain is that the status quo is gone. Thanks for watching.